Hello, and welcome to Insightful Conversations with your host, Three Principles practitioner, Del A.D. Jones. Join her each week as she welcomes some of the world's leading Three Principles teachers and practitioners who share how this understanding has dramatically improved the quality of their lives and the lives of those they work with.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm very pleased to have Dawn Wesolek with us today. Dawn is a rewilding guide, career coach, and student of the Three Principles. She practices worldwide, focusing on helping individuals reach freedom and purpose in their careers. She has worked as a career coach with graduates, corporations, small businesses, and individuals since 2015. After a history of burnout and breakdown in high-profile corporate jobs, she is now living her best life, transformed by the principles behind all human experience. She offers her clients a unique space for peace and reflection to find their inner creative guide and rewild their relationship to their work. Welcome, Dawn. I am so thrilled for this conversation, as you know. And I asked you to come on the show specifically because I want to talk about codependency, narcissism, or narcissistic abuse, because I feel it can often be misunderstood in the 3P community. And I think it's really important that we, and I'm just so grateful to you to come onto the show to discuss it with me, because I think it sheds light and more understanding in an area where some people, they're just confused. So I'm really grateful that you were willing to come on today. And we've known each other for a little while, but we got to know each other really well when you participated in my The Way Out of Codependency program. So I would love it if you would just share with our listeners a little bit about your life and how codependency and narcissism played in it, and what actually inspired you to join my program. So I'd love to, a little history here would be wonderful.
Absolutely. So I'll kind of give it a little bit of a potted background. I come from a family in the Midwest. I'm originally American, and I live in the UK now. And I come from a family that is rife with alcoholism and various addictions and mental health problems. And I don't say that lightly. My uncle was a famous psychiatrist, and he was the person who actually diagnosed postnatal depression for the first time.
Wow.
And he was always trying to figure out what was wrong with our family. That sounds very familiar, right? And so kind of my own journey with it was, we didn't really have any alcohol around the house, but I grew up with a lot of rage around me. My mother was a very, very angry person, extremely angry. And my father I kind of viewed as quite passive and weak. He was the provider, but she was the person that everyone was scared of. She always used to use the threat that you wait till your father comes home, but we were really scared of her. And then my first encounter with a narcissist was my brother. So I grew up in a house where he took out his rage on me, and because my mom took out her rage on him. So the idea of it being multi-generational is a really, really big thing. It was hidden. It was normalized. We were told everyone hits their children. We were told that everyone gets beaten. But my abuse was quite severe. You know, I was terrified for my life on a regular basis. And so for me, kind of what I learned is, if you're really smart and you put on weight, you can keep yourself safe from men and from the world. So I learned to kind of have everyone like me. I learned that I was an extremely high achiever. My mom always pushed me very hard, and she died of breast cancer. So kind of my female role model in life was this really, really angry person that, and there is a bit of me that believes cancer kind of manifests because of that trapped anger. And then when she passed away, the whole world on the outside saw how wonderful our life was and how she was so dedicated. And on the inside, all of that kind of rage got really trapped. It was never okay to be angry. It was never okay to express it. And so for me, I got out of the house, married the first man that asked. That's my story. Moved all the way over to the UK to escape from what I was growing up in. And came over here and brought it all with me. And, my story is quite, deep rooted layers of habitual behavior, which, in the kind of non-3P community, we call addictions. I turned to food. At my heaviest, I was 29 stone. I've lost over 220 pounds in my journey. I got involved in serial relationships, very, very promiscuous, and did that because I was always trying to find someone to plug that hole inside of me. But the codependency was always a bit hidden, and that's a nice way to say it. I always call myself a 5-star addict. So I got into recovery, and my whole life changed in 2004 or 5 when I broke up with my ex-husband. We got divorced after hurting him, and very badly. And then began this just development journey. And so what I did was I started uncovering the layers. I love the term that Amanda uses in the Little School of Big Change as well, which I did here when I first came into the principles, uncovery. And so what happened with me is I was uncovering the layers. I put down the behaviors that would, thank God for 12-step. I put down the behaviors that were killing me, and then slowly got deeper and deeper embedded into that modality, which was, I needed it, but it told me I was always sick. It told me I would never get well. And it told me I had to go and throw myself into all of this kind of self-help world in order to be okay, which suited me just fine. Because as a good little codependent, if you tell me if I do something, I'm okay, I'm off. I'm going to do that. I'll be all right. So stumbled through recovery very successfully in some ways, lost lots of extra weight, was doing service at multiple levels, very grateful for recovery. But what kind of happened was my life got really, really small. It was just about I was doing 5 different fellowships. I was constantly in the 12-step recovery process, you're constantly doing step 4s to go back into your past, which makes you feel really, really crap. And then kind of recycling it. And then I got a therapist, and she told me I was codependent and a love addict. And so I would always have a lot of issues. And there would, and she said to me, and I'll never forget when she discharged me, I was with her for 15 years, and she discharged me and she said, "You've done great. Now you'll need to come back when you're in a relationship." And I was like, "Well, what do you mean?" And she said, "Well, you'll need to come back." And so I went off and, didn't have a relationship, and my life got so good, not because not relationship, but I was flourishing. I was in a great place. I thought I had left all of this kind of past stuff behind. And then I moved, my life got amazing. I started, I do what I'm doing now. I did coaching. I moved away from the city, very successful career, always driven by success and achievement. And then I moved to where I live now, and lo and behold, literally 2 months to the day, I met a person who I thought was different than my narcissistic past. He was an artist. He was a bit of a rebel. He was, the jaunty hat wearing victim who, was a high intellect and a tortured soul. I walked into a relationship, I'm laughing now because, I think it's funny. I walked into a relationship with someone who on my second date told me that he had mental health problems and brought his sheet from his psychiatrist. He was so proud of the fact that he had a bar in the back garden. And I was thinking, okay, I can change this person. We will be great together. And you taught me about this narcissistic wound. And you taught me in your course that it's like we have this hole, and not even a hole in the soul, because that's what I was told in recovery. We have this hole inside of us, and when somebody else's teeth meet that hole, and that's what it was like, because he wasn't this wide boy, so when I'm Googling thing about narcissism, I'm not hearing about him hearing these flashy cars. No, he was angry at the world. He was poor. He was living in everybody else. The rich people were bad. He hated feminists. And I'm like the super feminist. He's like, women had oppressed men. So I'm like totally there listening, going, yeah, this is a great person for me to be with. He'll get me humble. And then it began. So that's kind of where the three principles found me, and I'll leave you to speak. But yeah, my journey here has been, always looking for something else outside of me to tell me I'm okay.
Yeah.
Always trying to run away from that wound, and then having it smack me in the face when everything's going really well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there was so much in your story. I'm going, me too, me too, me too. Classic, codependents that we are. It's, and that's the other thing I wanted to say, because I always say this in the Three Principles community. We're not labeling anybody. We know who we are at our essence. So we use the word codependency and narcissism to describe a set of behaviors, because otherwise we'd be sort of just reeling off the laundry list every time. But there are some sort of very classic traits that are quite identifiable, and they come in clusters. And, and I love what you described. I mean, often the codependency, does derive from childhood trauma. And it sounds like you definitely had a traumatic childhood. And, I did similar in some ways and different in other ways, but definitely impacted me growing up. Certainly was that always looking for love on the outside. And I know the expression I used was, it's like your teeth match my wound. We have these wounds that we tend to sort of, I always say we need a redo, or we want a redo. So we tend to sort of attract the same sort of dynamic we grew up in. So, I think there's this little sort of young child within us that wants to have it come out a different way. So we sort of unconsciously draw in these narcissistic relationships to sort of work them out and hopefully have change the ending of the story. So but I'm curious, because I know you were in the Three Principles way before we knew each other, but way before you took my course. So I'm wondering what it was that, because for me, I've encountered a lot of people that say, well, if it's just my thinking, if I change my thinking, then I should experience this relationship differently. A lot of people come to me with that sort of,
Sorry,
I'm looking at your face here. So just share to me, what was it that you wanted to see a little deeper within the 3P community, but around this subject?
I'm laughing because of my journey with it. Okay, so I got in and I used the Three Principles as a tool to fix that relationship. And I call it my hedge trimmer moment still. So I was on a ladder on my hedge, and I was listening to your podcast. I think it was Nicole Barton or somebody. And I was swearing at the phone, going, but it's all thought. Well, she's wrong. This isn't narcissism. No, there's no such thing. And then all of a sudden, I started like Googling, because I mean, the relationship was insane. Essentially, he went through, and this is just a normal narcissist codependent story. He was in and out of like psychiatric treatment during lockdown. I had no life. My life was him. I gave up everything. I literally focused. I couldn't get a job because it was never good enough. I was told I was a terrible mother. I was, the relationship, there was no physical intimacy because that was gross. And it was obviously my fault for wanting anything like that. So all my values all shut down. But I was going to use the Three Principles to fix this problem. And actually, I found the Three Principles because of him, because he told me that I was crazy and I needed to go and get a psychiatrist. So I found somebody, and she just happened to be a Three Principles coach. And then, I'm still trying to fix him. So I went on a beautiful course that Bill Pettit did. Amazing course to fix him. Because of course I was always trying to find something to fix him so I would be okay. And I kept listening to you and I kept getting angrier. And I was like, but I'm not codependent. He's not a narcissist. And it was just like, it kept coming back and coming back. And then all of a sudden, I had this moment where I was speaking to somebody else who actually was your guest this week on the podcast, which is Sharon. And she was on the guide training with me. She was in the Rewilding community, which I'm also in the beginning. And then Rohini Ross's program. And she reached out to me and she said, Dawn, she goes, this is abuse. You are being abused. This is a domestic abuse situation. And I was like, no. I was like, he's not doing anything physically. He would never hit me. He's telling me that he's worried about me hitting him. And so I called a women's refuge line. and they sent me some information on narcissism, and I went, oh God. And I was like, no, it's not real. And then I went on your course and I spent the first 2 or 3 weeks trying. I went to your webinar on your course, trying to convince myself that I didn't need this, right? That this isn't really it's just a touch of codependency. You know, I got a touch of pregnancy, right? and so what happened was I was just like, wow. And then every week I was like, Del, this is my story. It's the other side of the coin. And I stopped trying to figure out if I was codependent or not, if he was narcissistic or not. And it just made sense. It was just like, all right, so this is the habitual thought patterns that I get into when I am in a relationship with someone that I need to fix, that I think I need to fix, that I think somehow it'll make it better. And kind of through exploring it, that term even, and getting this conditioned thinking out of my head, that because in the 3 principles, in order to communicate with the rest of the world, you know, we need terminology that fits. So now when I speak to other people and I spot the red flags, I go, oh, I know someone who can help you with that. And I point them in the direction and I say, does this sound like abuse? Does this sound like you? And the difference with the way that you teach it within the 3 principles, Dal, is you don't label the person as bad.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that I almost said his name. No, we're not going to. I don't think that he's a bad person. What
Exactly.
I think is that for me, I just don't want to play in his sandbox anymore. I don't want to be involved with someone that for some reason, no matter how far apart we are, we have this psychic bond that he can send me a text and I can all of a sudden want to run back in there and fix it.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, well, we I love that, the psychic bond, but and then there's also, as I share in the course, there's actually a chemical, a neurochemical reaction that happens, that when we do get that text or we see that name, it all gets reactivated. So there's actually science behind also the, as you say, the habitual thought patterns and everything that gets us involved in those relationships in the beginning, and then what keeps us in them. But I love what you mentioned, because it is such an important part. And for me, especially because I sort of have been in this world for so long, the codependent and narcissistic abuse world, and outside of the 3 principles, there's this a tendency I hear to sort of vilify, they're called narcs, and there's a really aggressive, they're the bad people. And I'm not saying that, some of the habitual behavior that narcissistic personalities point to aren't terribly damaging and terribly hurtful. But that is occurring because these people are living from a very, very small, constricted worldview, where they are fearful, they're afraid, they feel they need to dominate and control to have any power in their life. And if they only knew who they were at their essence, that they wouldn't need to have to behave that way. But just because we can understand and we can see the psychological innocence of why somebody might be behaving in the way that they do, doesn't mean that we can change them. Doesn't mean that we have to suffer abuse. It doesn't mean that we're not, sort of, as I think codependents, we all like to be loved, we all like to be liked and thought of as nice people. Doesn't mean we're a bad person if we walk away. And that's the other thing about the principles I love, which is it teaches us that we all come, into this world of form with the equal amounts of resilience and innate well-being and wisdom. And when we know that, we don't have to fix each other. So a lot of us stay, with people that we think need fixing. But the beauty is, once we realize, oh no, everybody's okay at their essence, we can just step back. We can let them find their own way. So I love that. So I want to, I want to give me a brief description. So I want to hear how you show up now, but very briefly, how did codependency impact, not just obviously you shared your personal story, but how did it impact how you showed up at work too? Some of the codependent ways you saw.
I just find narcissist. And this is the thing, as a coach now, I would always have the bullying boss. I would always have, I'll never forget, my favorite story is I used to be a consultant, in IT, traveling all around the world. And I worked for a company who we were incentivized based on the hours that we did. So you can imagine that, not, I mean, we're talking like triple time, where I was working like 80 hours a week. And I remember I needed a holiday. I was burning out. And I was working for this really driven man. I'll never forget. And and he pulled me into his office screaming at me. Everyone could hear, saying how I cost the company £20,000 because I needed a holiday and what the flip was wrong with me, and literally destroyed me and made me think it was my fault, and then walked out of the office. And then the other girl who walked in behind me reported him and got him fired. But I never had the strength to do that.
Yeah.
And this was repeated over and over and over again. I went to employment tribunal because I found a bully at work. I kept repeating the same patterns again and again and again. When I was like, oh, maybe I've got this or maybe I've got that. It was always about the rest of the world being the problem, and me kind of finding this weird dynamic with people, men and women, who had I could either become smaller than, or be pushed around by.
Yeah. That's so interesting. And then just even, besides that relationship dynamic at work, I think we grew up, settling for crumbs. So we don't self-advocate. We do sort of, be grateful for what we're given. We don't advocate for ourselves, or we become people pleasers and negate our own needs, as you say, reaching burnout just to keep the boss happy. So, because there's such a low sense of self, our self-esteem is quite low when we are locked in that codependent habitual thinking. So I want to hear, I love makeover shows. So tell me who Dawn is today. How do you show up, not just at work, but in your love life, as you're parenting, and how you deal with your family still? Because when we come from these, families of origin where this dynamic, as we change, the whole dynamic of the family changes. So I'd love you to just touch on those areas just a little. So,
well, I'll touch on the highlights, how different it is. I'm living my best life. I'm fortunate enough to work for a company that I love 3 days a week. It's one of my best friends' farms, and he, has been so inspired by working with me as a coach that he wants to become a coach, and they're creating like a retreat center in this beautiful orchard in the middle of Ottery St. Mary. I'm also working as a community manager for the Rewilding community, which was like beyond my wildest dreams. I do this for fun, and I'm going to be paid for it. But it's more than that. For me, it's just felt like I found a family, a healthy family. And that's the thing about the 3 principles and then the micro communities within it. We just keep it, what you give in, it comes back to you tenfold. So my work life has exploded. I'm getting opportunities, I do career coaching with business coaching, and that's my life. And people are just coming to me and asking for help in that way. And it's beautiful. I'm working with the Kickstarter program here in the UK, trying to help unemployed youth get work during COVID, which is really tough. Looking at CVs, did 2 interviews today, interview coaching. It's so fun, and they're so young and so cool. I have a daughter, and she's been transformed by this journey. A couple of days ago, just to show you the difference, she used to settle for crumbs in her friendships, and she's now standing up, and she's showing up different. So the real boisterous young girl that she's friends with, is like they become so close because my daughter's called Zia, and she shows up in life, and our relationship is so much easier. I'm easier to be around. I'm not angry. I'm not holding all this anger. I didn't realize I had been trying to kind of push away my mom for so long that I had trapped that anger inside of me. So now I'm able to laugh at myself and laugh at my vulnerabilities, and I'm lighter to be around. The difficulty with me physically, I sent you 2 photos. I always say it's my before and after photo, and it's of me when I was really, really, really in a bad place. And then it's me now. I feel like I can wear color again. I feel like everything is coming alive. And my love life, Del, I'm blaming you for this. Yeah. that it's just exploded. We're in lockdown here. We're just about to open up, and I've got my little black book's like full, and I'm available for. I'm not longer trying to find the one.
Yeah.
I'm actually just enjoying the moments that I have with all of these beautiful people, souls who are vulnerable, souls who are just gorgeous within themselves for all of their gifts, and I'm not limiting myself. Before I would have gone, okay, well, I have to, date these people, and I'm walking away really fast when it's not working. I'm
Yeah.
catching myself kind of, okay, I'm over helping with this person. I need to step back, because one of the biggest lessons I've had about this with romance is if you're constantly stepping forward and rescuing your partner, you're not allowing that person to be themselves.
Yeah.
You're actually consuming them like a food. And I'll never forget, I remember once I was speaking to a therapist, and she said, everything that you do, all your addictive behavior is all about consuming because you feel so empty inside.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And because of the three principles, I don't feel empty inside anymore.
Yeah, that's so true. And I love what you bring it up. And I also want to say, another misunderstanding I sometimes find in the three principles is there's this sort of thing of like, oh no, therapy is old. We don't need it anymore. But I really value, I mean, I was in therapy for 30 years. It saved my life. It gave me a lot of clarity. The principles, I say, showed me the way out of my behavior. But I value what I learned through therapy. And I think it does, highlights and helps us understand why we sort of got set in some of the habitual behaviors we did. But we can also, what the principles does is it shows you the way out of them, as I said, which is amazing. But there's when we have this hole within us, we're always trying to consume and fill that up, whether it's love, we think it's all coming from the outside. But the other thing is, I think when we feel broken and damaged, we project that onto others, and we feel that our match is somebody that's equally broken and damaged. So that's why we keep attracting these relationships into our life. And once we realize, there's nothing wrong with us, we're perfectly healthy and whole, besides this habitual thinking we have, we feel differently about ourselves, and therefore who we attract into our life mirrors that. It really does. So I love what you're pointing to. And you also mentioned your parenting, and that's often as our children rather get a little older, that's where we can go, ooh, I'm still being a bit codependent here. I want my child to like me, or you might not have healthy boundaries because you're still having some residual sort of codependent thinking. So it affects us in all areas of our life, and it's good to just sort of observe that and know that, and then, as you say, just show up differently, because you don't have to believe that thinking anymore.
And you asked one question, which I just wanted to share a little bit of a miracle with me. So my father has dementia, and my brother, who I've talked about, the original narcissist, though there is a question there, he's taking care of him. And I have to get involved from a financial perspective. And I have such a gentle way of being. I have boundaries, internal boundaries. So if I'm feeling unsafe, I will end the call, or I will limit contact with them. But I'm able to call them up on the phone and wish them happy birthday. I'm able to step away from the drama before, and I don't get the same habitual. I mean, I used to get the shakes. I used to not be able to speak. I would be talking at 90 miles an hour. I'd over talk over the top of him. There was no space because I was so scared of being hurt. And all of that is going. Every interaction we have, I'm kind of feeling like I'm present to what's showing up in the moment. And I feel like I've got enough boundaries around me to keep me safe, regardless if he's angry, raging, not mentally in a good place. And I don't get involved when everybody else tries to pull me in. Someone says, how was your brother? I'm like, they're fine. Want to know how they are, just give them a call. It doesn't mean I walk away if my dad doesn't need help, or if my brother's really, really ill, because he does manifest in that way. but I don't feel like I have to swoop in. Like, like I always say, I used to carry a roll of tinfoil and a donkey around with me and try to, make everyone my knight in shining armor. And actually, normally it was me. I just don't do that anymore. It's just, I don't need to rescue.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Everybody got their wisdom.
Yeah, that's a that's a hysterical visual there. But it's so true. I love what you point to. I also want to just comment on what you said about the boundaries, because often when I have people come to me, they're like, they'll say, well, other people sort of, stomp all over to my boundaries. And I think when we have boundaries out here, we can get very sort of um, very upset if people don't respect those boundaries. But I love what you said, which is what I always teach, which is it's that internal boundary. It's because that's what we do have control of. We don't have control of anybody else around us and the environment and our circumstances, but we do have that internal boundary that you mentioned, and that ability to say, I don't feel safe here, or this isn't sort of, I don't really want to be in this situation anymore. And you can remove yourself rather than trying to control the outside. It's like, I'm putting an end to this right now. So I love that you mentioned that. And more than anything, understanding the separate realities, understanding that whatever thought created world that your father lives in or your brother lives in, it's not personal. And as you said, you can show up still with an open heart and still, appreciating their sort of innocence, their psychological innocence. But as you say, you have your expectations have changed, that they behave in a certain way, and you show up differently, and you can have a relationship, a healthy relationship with distance, healthy distance, I say. So
And I
yes.
think that's the big thing. I don't blame. I don't have any, and I have no. I mean, seriously, I have no malice.
Exactly.
My brother could have taken my life many times growing up. My ex-partner could have damaged both me and my daughter beyond belief. I have no malice because I followed my wisdom and I got out.
Yeah.
I didn't use the principles to stay in a relationship that was dangerous and damaging. What I did was listen to the quiet. And that's the thing about the separate realities and the boundaries, because from the quiet, I know what to do, and Sid said we have to live life, right? And the thing that really makes me smile about it is like living life for me wasn't staying in a damaged relationship. I mean, I came into Rohini's program, as you know, to fix this dang thing. I was going to fix this with the principles. I went to like 5 different teachers helping me. Please help me fix this.
Mm.
And what I did was fix, I didn't need to fix that. That wasn't meant to be. I realized that I just needed to let myself come forward,
Yeah.
and I needed to be present and let them go, because I'm not their teacher.
Yeah.
That's the gift. I'm not everyone's teacher, and I won't not be liked if I'm not everyone's teacher.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the thing about the narcissist codependent thing that's really big for me, Dal, is that a codependent is not a narcissist teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And wow, what a beautiful gift to know that.
Yeah. Yeah, I love what you're saying, and it is. It's respect. It's absolutely, and I love what you're pointing to. I think people get afraid when they hear the word narcissism and codependency that we're going to vilify and make somebody wrong and bad. Just like you said, I've had people in my life that have done things that were very hurtful to me and very damaging to me. But I say damaging, they impacted me. They didn't damage me. I'm never damaged at my essence and at my core. But again, that freedom to not have any judgment, malice, anger in your heart, how freeing is that? It's so beautiful. It's such a gift. And so I just want to thank you. This has been a great conversation. I think one of many I hope to have with you around this subject. So
Estelle, and it's thank you for what you did. I know you probably didn't mean to do it, but my hedge trimmer moment when I was swearing at you, I was so angry. And and here I am, humble and very, very grateful, because you helped me as I was healing, not to go back. And you helped me to see, and I'm blooming. I mean, my life is just exploding because I now know a lot more about how the three principles manifest in my life, and how I can innocently use the power of thought to try to fix someone else. And I don't need to do that today. Everything is fine. They've got their own wisdom.
Exactly. Absolutely. I love that. And you just used my favorite three principles word, innocently. We're all innocently doing the best we can with our thinking in the moment. So let's end on that note. But thank you again. That was just beautiful. And I will see you soon and continue, as I say, to have this conversation with you. So
thank you, Mel. I really appreciate you. Take care.
Me too. Thank you so much. Bye-bye. Thank you so much for listening to the show. If you're interested in learning more about my coaching and mentoring packages, please reach out to me at deladjones@gmail.com. I would love to hear from you.